Hello there, and welcome back to the Smell of Water channel. I am Ramona, and today's Reddit stories, we're doing more of the personal, paranormal, weird story encounter things. A lot of these to go around. Anyway, so here we go with story number one. I grew up in a 150-year-old home on tall piers that has been in my family since it was built. Generations have been born, grown up, married, lived, and died there. Mine was the sixth generation to occupy the home, and at least 9 previous relatives have died of natural causes in the house that we know of. One of the bedrooms is actually a traditional dying room. Now, when I say by natural causes, I mean everything from old age to yellow fever to childbirth. Again, as far as we know, no one has died violently there, and that affirmation is essential. We were always peaceful, law-abiding cattle farmers on that side of the family. So aside from a few people who fought in Civil War and World War II, everybody just, I don't know, they ran their family business and kept to themselves. The origins of my family home are somewhat weird. No one talks about my great-great-grandfather who died at 40 years old. This man is something of a mystery. He appeared in the area out of nowhere after the Civil War, and despite being a destitute soldier, he somehow managed to marry a woman from one of the wealthier families in the area. She was purported to be a great beauty and a powerful woman. Her dowry was a little over 500 acres, and it included the property where I grew up and own today. I have never been able to find a death certificate, newspaper article, or other document relating to that great-great-grandfather's life or death. I heavily suspect that his death was unnatural. Why? Because that house had something in it. It wasn't malevolent, but it certainly made itself known many times. My most terrifying childhood memory is because of that presence. I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I was sleeping in one of the side mudrooms. Since my parents had quite a few kids, beds were set up in these rooms, which had an entire wall of windows facing into the yard. Because of the tall piers, the floor of the home was at least 7 feet off the ground, so it was assumed that no one could look in or get in. But that night, as I lay in bed and was trying to fall asleep, I happened to look toward the windows, and there was a disembodied face that was just staring at me from the middle of the other side of the window pane. It wasn't human. It was corpulent, bloated, long, with deep nasolabial creases, jowls leering, thick lips parted to show rotted teeth. The skin was rough, with molted green patches on the cheeks, and a pinkish-red hue everywhere else. It didn't have eyebrows, facial hair, or any hair at all. I was terrified. But what could I do? I ducked under the covers in terror. A few minutes later, when I looked again, it was gone. Even now, decades later, I remember that face. Other things happened to me while growing up there, but the above was the worst, and to me felt like it was the most personal. Did I mention my spouse and I are currently in the process of preparing the property to move back into it? I anticipate that this move will be interesting. Story 2. I live alone with no pets. I carry a book bag with me whenever I go because I wear a prosthesis and need to have specific tools with me, and it's also convenient. Anyway, I was prescribed some antibiotics and put them in my bag, so when I got home, I set the bag on my recliner, looked out for my meds, opened the vial, shook out one into my hand. I then closed the vial tightly and threw it into my bag. It bounced off the back of my recliner, and I watched it fall into my bag. I even said the whole Kobe thing while I did it. I went to the kitchen for water to wash down the one antibiotic I had in my hand. It took about 45 seconds before I was walking back toward my bag on the recliner. When I got close, I saw a pill on the floor by the recliner. I knew I hadn't dropped one, and I knew the lid was on tight, but the closer I got, I saw my antibiotics spill onto the seat of my recliner, in front of my bag, and some on the floor. I was dumbfounded, and reached inside my bag to find the empty pill vial, closed tight like, what, WTF? But it ain't over, folks. I was at my mother's house later that day. She was sitting at her kitchen table, holding her lapdog in her lap, and I was leaning on her kitchen sink, explaining my story to her. Suddenly, with no one moving and no one there but us, we heard a noise that sounded like something hard falling onto the linoleum floor. I happened to follow the sound to see 2 tiny stones come to a stop. We looked at each other and said, "How the F did that happen?" There were 2 stones, and I put them in a Ziploc bag. Now there's only one. It is so strangely random. Story 3. Many years back, I was visiting family up in the deep mountains of northern PA, near the border of New York. close to Blue Mountains and Wilkes Barre, Pennsylvania. I was coming down a long stretch of road leading into the mountain valley, and came across a long tree line with a forever road straight through it. Out of nowhere, as I'm driving, a figure that resembles a person walking in a white shirt emerges from the wilderness down the dark road. I was only able to see them visually because their white clothing shone off my headlights. I eventually stopped the car a good quarter of a mile away from it. Looking back, I could see it faintly in the distance using my emergency flashlight, which I always carry with me. The figure moved as if it were in slow motion, barely gaining traction towards my light or location. Notably, there was considerable distance between us, but I could sense the figure slowly getting closer down the road. I was honestly really spooked the whole time, as this was in the middle of nowhere, late at night. I was thinking, who the hell would be walking out this late at night? Were they lost, or needed help? So, like an idiot, I shouted out towards the white figure walking faintly towards me down this road. However, as I kept shouting at it, the figure would not respond. So, to be safe, I got back in my car, drove a little further out, and then U-turned to drive in, or drive by, or close, to see who or what it was. However, by the time I saw the figure, it was nowhere to be found when I closed the distance. At that point, I was still shaken, but concerned at the same time, because it was completely gone from that point on. So after I coasted up and down the strip of road several times, I honked my horn, but met with no such luck. So I eventually drove to my destination. To this day, I don't know who or what I saw, and I don't know if I left someone in need or in need of help. It was the weirdest experience. Story 4. I used to live in an old cotton mill remade into apartments. The mill was built in the 1800s and closed in the early 1900s. I had a roommate at the time who also had a daughter, under 10 years old, who lived with us. The laundry room in the basement was eerie, but not haunted. One afternoon, my roommate had been doing laundry and had it all piled up in his room. It was a lazy Saturday, and his daughter was in the living room, watching cartoons. He would go back and forth from the apartment to the basement every hour or so to do laundry. He had left for work by the afternoon. During one of his trips to the laundry room, he came back to the apartment to find all of the clothes in his room folded neatly at the end of his bed. He wouldn't do this himself, let alone his daughter. He would throw them into a laundry basket and call it a day. Then he found all the clothes folded in his room. His daughter was sitting on the couch where she had been. He asked her, "Did you do this?" She was very confused and concerned. She clearly hadn't moved, and also just wasn't able to fold clothes like this. He was so worried that he called me at work to ask me if I had done it. I had not. He ended up grabbing his daughter and leaving the house for the day. It scared him very, very badly. Fast forward a few days ago. I'm doing laundry at home, and I'm following a similar pattern. Laundry is in the basement, and I'm running back and forth from the bedroom to the basement, just making a pile and folding as I get everything on the bed. I had brought a load of towels up and went to start another load in the basement. When I came back, my towels were folded in the bathroom. No explanation. No one else was in the house. Just me. Story 5. I've told this story here before, I think when I was around 18. I was sitting in the car with someone, and we were discussing shows and movies from our childhood that we enjoyed. We started talking about the Inspector Gadget movie from the late 90s, and that's when it got weird. I had the radio playing, and it was set to my city's local hip-hop R&B station. While we were discussing the movie, the radio cut out mid-sentence and started playing the Inspector Gadget theme song. It played for approximately 30 to 45 seconds, then resumed the regular radio broadcast as if nothing had happened. The radio wasn't playing loud at all. The windows were up and nobody outside the car could hear the convo. There were other things I've had happen, but this is still one of the most unexplainable things that's happened to me. Story 6. I was pumping gas and talking to someone at the pump across from me when they pointed out a very nice car pulling in, not one you'd typically see in this area. A tall white guy in a nice suit, good-looking, short brown hair, gets out of the car, looks at us, smiling, waves as he walks into the gas station. I keep talking to the guy from across from me, who's facing me. The gas station is behind me. Then suddenly, the guy completely freezes with his eyes wide and mouth open. I was confused and asked if he was okay, and then I turned around. The tall guy in the suit had walked out of the gas station, but it wasn't the same guy. Or instead, something was wrong with his face, I'm not sure. His face was suddenly a lot paler. Eyes were shrunk down, looking like weird black holes about the size of quarters. The nose was gone, suddenly non-existent. just flat, and the mouth was huge and wide with too many teeth. He just waved at us, opened his back door, and grabbed a suitcase he brought around the car to the driver's side. He got back in, backed up, then turned and stared at us while waving again as he drove past us. I have never been so terrified in my life, even though I really didn't and still don't understand why. The guy I'd seen talking the guy I'd been talking to at the pump was freaking out and ran in, but the clerk described him as we'd first seen him. I went straight home, was afraid to tell my husband because I knew he'd think I was insane. Luckily he did not, or at least not he admitted it, and I've never seen anything like that before or since. I have no idea, speculation, or theory of what that was. Paranormal, supernatural, aliens, shapeshifter? I'm not sure I believe in any of that, so I have no leads. But a total stranger saw it too. It was definitely not a mask or cover, and I have no explanation. I hope I never encounter anything even remotely similar to that again. Story 7. Well, the first happened when I was probably 5 or 6. I was in my mom's room because of the massive thunderstorm outside, and I was terrified. I couldn't sleep, so I was lying in bed, and then I saw someone dressed entirely in white, covering even their head, walk out of the wall opposite me. They had a sort of white glow about them. They stopped by the bed and said something. I can't remember what. All I remember saying is that they had been quiet, so don't wake my mom. They then walked back into the wall. Strangely, I don't remember being scared at all. To this day, I have no idea if it was real or a vivid dream. Another situation occurred a couple of years ago. I was home alone, watching TV, when I heard voices murmuring. At first, I assumed it was just the TV, but the voices stayed even after I turned it off. My dog, who had been sleeping beside me, was alert and staring at the door to a room where the voices seemed to be coming from. I went inside, but there was nobody there. It was pretty creepy, and I still have no explanation for it. The last situation was less creepy, but still pretty weird. I often have nightmares that wake me up. When it happens, I go to the kitchen to check the time to see if there's any point in trying to fall back asleep. It's worth noting that the next to the clock is a large window. A little while back I had a nightmare and got up to check the time, as I do around 4:20 a.m. Out of the window I noticed a large, bright object in the sky. I've never seen it before, but compared to the stars, it was way too big to be one. Think of an apple seed compared to a breadcrumb. It was big. I figured it was probably a UFO, and that seemed pretty cool. At one of the houses my dad rented when I was around 12, a lot of creepy things would happen. First off, I discovered a number of buried animal bones in the shallow, unmarked graves in the backyard, possibly 6 burials in total. There was also a pentagram spray painted on the door, and the floor of the shed in that backyard. I went in once, and I never went back. The house always felt odd. The back room, in particular, was always freezing, even when the rest of the house was warm or temperate. I stayed out of there, despite Dad having stored the games, toys, and such back there. Whenever I stayed over there, every other weekend, strange things would happen. The 2 creepiest were clearly hearing my name being called in the dead of night from outside, somewhere in the street. I slept on the couch in the living room, refusing the back bedroom. It was a woman's voice. It happened several times. Being touched and tapped on one night while I was trying to fall asleep. It wasn't subtle. There were firm taps on my shoulder and around my side, like someone wanted my attention. Being Catholic, I got some holy water from my main home at Mom's at her suggestion and brought it over and blessed the crap out of everything. I was never touched again, though I heard the voice once or twice more. Dad never experienced a frickin' thing, and he primarily lived alone. I guess whoever or whatever was there just thought I was more interesting. Story 8. When I was around 24, I went off the road, tumbling and wrapping the roof of my car around a thick tree. When the police arrived, I was wandering around the area, thoroughly mentally checked out. One of the officers asked if I had a passenger, to which I positively and confidently insisted that I did. When they inspected the car, there was no trace of anyone else. However, I clearly remembered having a conversation with a man who appeared to be in his 40s or 50s, with a bushy, dark beard, shaggy, dark hair, and wearing a faded army jacket. Soon after the paramedics arrived, I passed out. I awoke at the hospital later with my mother running up to the gurney that I was on. Soon after, the doctor went to work, stitching the gash above my right eyebrow and my shredded knuckles. The next day, my mother gave me a ride to the lot where the car had been towed. It was flat. The entire roof was in the driver's seat, and the blood visible through the shattered windshield, across the steering wheel, and in the driver's seat. Given my injuries, I was obviously in the car when it was flattened. The windshield shredded my right knuckles, and the frame broke my left pinky in 7 places. The gash on my eyebrow, presumably, came from the sunroof, though which I had theoretically escaped. But mine if mine if that really explains how I survived the accident in the first place, and the roof crushing the seat that I was in. After a week or so we received a police report, which explained that it appears I went off the road due to weather conditions, even though I recall nothing more than a light rain. But that was what occurred to me when I asked my mom how she knew to come to the hospital. That was before everyone had a cell phone, and her information was not listed on the possessions I had in the car. Story 9. This is the first time I have shared this on the web. However, I have shared this story with my friends and family in person. I was already very aware that there were things in the world that we cannot explain with certainty, science, or calculations. But this story is something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. I was in rehab, like a pretty modern one that was considered to be an inpatient hospital. It wasn't an actual hospital or on the grounds of a hospital, but it was staffed 24/7 with doctors, nurses, counselors, and of course patients. I was a patient at the time and had been in the past. Sobriety can be a long road. No one had ever said that this place was haunted. I want to make that clear. It did not have a reputation for it. That said, several people, men, women, have died on the premises. 1 or 2 deaths were from overdoses from smuggled-in drugs, and another couple of withdrawal complications. That is what the counselors told us. They wanted us to know what was like a matter of life or death. Better to get it right now than to have something like this happen to you in the future. So there I am, going through the journey of recovery. And several minor things happened that kind of made me go, However, one night I was completely out of it, sleeping, and I'm having a pretty terrible nightmare. The kind that you want to wake up from because they're so brutally vivid and horrid. I finally managed to wake up out of this dream, and this is what I wake up to. I open my eyes. I am looking at the large window that takes up a whole wall of the room. Imagine a sliding glass door-sized window spanning the entire wall. The window looks over a parking lot from the 2nd story of the building. The streetlights illuminate the parking lot, creating a very dim backlight. There, in front of this dim blacklight, is a shadowy figure, literally staring into my eye sockets. The minute I opened them, I came out of the dream. This thing, that I could see from the waist up, was perpendicular to the ground. So I am lying down, and this thing is standing in the same position I am lying. I want to be clear. It is standing in front of me, as if it were on the wall, sideways. So when I open my eyes, as if we were having a high noon shootout 12 paces apart. The thing is lined up from me sideways, and I am lying in a bed. For about a whole second, nothing happens, and I am coming out of the dream trying to effing grasp what the F I am seeing. It's darker than the dim black light, like pitch black. The thing, shadow person, then somehow realizes I am looking at it, and darts through the wall so abruptly as if because it was seen and the gig is up. As it darts through the wall, it hits the blinds, and the long dangling kind, and the long chain used for opening and closing them. I mean, when I tell you I opened my eyes briefly, I had a stare down with the shadow person standing sideways, and the shadow figure goes, "Oh shit, he's awake," darts through the wall, smashing into the blinds and the chain, all in a matter of seconds. This is exactly what I'm telling you. I'm now completely freaking out at this point. I jump out of bed, turn every single available light on, and the effing blinds are still swaying from the contact that this thing made. And I didn't dare go anywhere near that section of the room. I am like, WTF was that? What? Then the very next thought was, not one person in the world will ever believe me. After a considerable amount of time had passed, and there were no further explanations or sightings of shadow persons, I calmed myself down enough to get a few hours of sleep. Here's the ass kicker. I wake up in the morning, and I'm not joking, the chain of the blinds is still effing swinging. Keep in mind, it was like 3 a.m. when all this happened. 3 a.m. and it's still swinging from getting nailed by a darting shadow figure. So at this point, I need a witness. I hear people waking up, and I run and grab my closest rehab buddy, and I'm like, "Dude, you won't believe this, but come and look." I gave him a quick rundown of what had happened and show him the still swinging window chain. He was absolutely stunned, to say the least. But he also knew I wouldn't just bullshit him for no reason. So he takes a look at the chain, which is still steadily swinging, and says, WTF, man, when did this happen? And I'm like, bro, it was 3 a.m. So he decides not to touch the chain, and we decide let's see what happens. I mean, it won't keep up perpetually moving and swinging, right? We go to breakfast. We return to our rooms by 9 a.m. He and I immediately go to my room to check on the chain, and it is still swinging with literally no discernible way of keeping it with the momentum. We walk up to it slowly, examine if any fans, vents, or airflow of any kind are pushing the chain in its perpetual path. And no possibility of anything causing it to continue swinging. Finally, my buddy cracks. Very hesitantly, he grabs the chain and stops it, as any good investigator would check it or check around it, and it was like, this is so strange. Let's see if we can get to do it by ourselves. This began about 2 hours of swinging the chain ourselves, and every single time it wouldn't keep perpetually swinging. It just wouldn't. We tried everything to duplicate the swinging. It could not be made to swing for more than 30 seconds before it came to a stop. My buddy looks at me and says, I believe you 100%. Nothing else will ever make sense. You couldn't have made that up on your own. I kept in touch with you for a while after we graduated from rehab, always talking about this story. Our only regret is not letting it continuously swing. I wonder if it would still be swinging today if we had left it. If anyone knows anything about perpetual motion, it is tough to create. In fact, there is often a need for an energy source. The energy source in this case was a sideways, standing, staring, dating, a shadow figure. As I have mentioned, other things happened, but this is the cake thief. I will forever believe there is more to this world than we are told. Thanks for reading this. I finally put the effort in to type it all out. I found it quite a bit. Feel free to ask me for clarification. I remember it as if it were yesterday. She told me that someone came to her door, telling her that her son had been in an accident and was on the way to the hospital as they spoke. When I asked what he looked like, she described a man around his late 40s with dark, messy hair, a bushy beard, and a faded army jacket. To this day, I still vaguely recall someone talking to this guy as I drove home that night. I can't remember what we talked about or when he got in the car. I barely remember that ride home, with many blanks, until I woke up in the hospital. Still boggles my mind that it really happened that night. Story 10. When I was almost 6, a few months after my grandpa died, I found his body in his chair. I was playing in my room along with a cardboard box full of broken toys. My home was effed up, and my dad was a violent, physically abusive psychopath, constantly hitting my mom and eventually me, daily. So I had some trauma going on, but I was a good kid, quiet, polite, empathetic, helpful, well-behaved. There's what happened. I was sitting cross-legged in front of my toy box, singing to myself, when the box lifted straight up into the air to the ceiling, 7 feet, and it was thrown down in front of me, not dropped, thrown with force. Enough force to explode the seams of the box and shake the wall. It was a big 3 by 3 by 3 box, roughly. My mom came in screaming for me for being loud and breaking the box. I literally hadn't moved and just sat there a foot or two away. It wasn't me. From that moment on, I've had a dark energy following me around. It latched on to me that day and had resurfaced in my life every single time I did something right, achieved a goal, was happy, or fell in love. I saw a shaman 9 years ago, before my son was born, and with the goal of unlatching this thing. I wasn't going to have it around any more. It was intense and scary as F trying to get this thing off me. The shaman described it to me, without ever having spoken to me previously. It was exactly what I'd seen a few times in my darkest moments. A horse-headed, massive, black-scaled creature. At that point, I let go of myself and let the shaman do the work. It was brutal. I got sober afterwards and stayed that way, now 8 years. I've never seen or felt it again. This sounds crazy, I know. I'm level-headed, based on philosophy and science and reality. This shit messed me up. I've done great things since that day with the shaman. The reason I mentioned my grandpa earlier is that I was extremely close to him when he died, and found out later that he had a massive piece of shit and an abuser. I genuinely think it was his spirit that somehow followed him that came to me. My grandmother, before she died 20 years later on her deathbed, mentioned my grandpa having a dark spirit with a horse head that followed him around his entire life. I've never said a word about it to any of my family, ever. Only one girlfriend knew because she saw it. She was deeply spiritual and connected. My grandmother never knew that I had the same spirit latched onto me. It freaked me out. This is the first time, I'm 47, that I've ever mentioned it in any public way. So there you go. I hope you have enjoyed some of these stories. Some of them are pretty interesting and creepy. Gotta be honest with you there. Hope you have enjoyed this though. If you did, maybe leave a like or a comment. Go check out another video. I'd appreciate it. But until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye.